Okay, so I'm calling the meeting to order. We have a quorum. Um, our first order of business, I guess, will be public comment. Um, is there any public comment? Need to go to the thing there and push the button and talk into the. Go.
I'll go ahead and
We have two people want to, so the first one goes first. John Dorman.
On Darwin, Buellton, California. I noticed this last week there was an article in the News Hawk about the history of Haskell's Pier in Goleta, and I understand the commission previously was interested in the disposition of Haskell's Pier. I recommend the article as it's a complete history from the creation of the pier by Signal Oil and Mr. Sam Mosier back in the 1940s to date. And currently the pier is under the jurisdiction of the State Lands Commission. And at some point there will be a determination as to what the ultimate fate of the pier will be. I think the article was very well written, and I recommend everybody get on the News Hawk while the article is still up and running to familiarize themselves with the history of this particular pier. This is the northernmost pier in Santa Barbara County that is still operational, given the destruction of the Gaviota Pier in 2014, and there appears to be no interest on the part of the state Parks and Recreation Department on reestablishing the Gaviota Pier. It is not mentioned at all in their general plan update documents. I took this matter up with Assembly Member Hart at his recent office hours in Buellton earlier this month, and presented him with a package of the history of the Gaviota Pier and how important it had been until the storms of 2014 took it offline. This assembly member said he would have his staff look into it. I also have filed several protests with the State Department of Parks and Recreation because their notice of preparation of under CEQA of the general plan amendment indicated that there were no biological impacts which were potentially significant given the state parks plans to reroute Gaviota Creek. I think this is a big mistake on their part and a CEQA violation, and I brought it to the attention of the person who had prepared the document, which was circulated at the first scoping meeting at the Vista Del Mar School. Thank you.
John, I had a question there. Could you recite the reference where that article was published so Teresa can get in the minutes so we can all look at it?
Yes, it's the Santa Barbara News Hawk, which is an online newspaper. And it was up this last week, and it was called The History of Haskell's Pier. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dave Kolker from Ventura County Fishermen's.
Thank you. I'm going to read some notes just so I stay on point here with time. Good afternoon, commissioners and chair. My name is Dave Kolker, and I'm the current executive director of the Ventura County Commercial Fishermen's Association. I want to start off by saying thank you for the time. Also, I wanted to note that I have been here before this commission, maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, where I introduced the VCCFA during a period where we were rebuilding. At that time, I shared that I would return once we were more organized and ready to engage in meaningful projects. I'm happy to report that since that meeting, we've grown into an organization of about 80 members and a full staff and a full working operating board of directors. Since we're in a position now to speak a little bit more about regional discussions, one of the efforts is the potential reestablishment of a Ventura County Fish and Wildlife Commission, which was dissolved in 2024. I've had an initial meeting with our Ventura County Supervisor, Vianney Lopez, who has expressed interest in exploring this concept and has assigned a staff member to work with me as I move through the discovery phase. I'll be reporting back to her office with what I learned through this process. That brings me to why I'm here today. Santa Barbara County represents the closest and most relevant example of an active Fish and Wildlife Commission, and I'm here in a learning capacity to better understand how your commission functions, how it interfaces with the county, and what has contributed to its effectiveness over time. From our perspective, there is real value in having a body like this, particularly when it comes to supporting communication across stakeholders, contributing to the long-term stewardship and addressing issues that exist within our shared marine ecosystems that extend beyond county boundaries. As I mentioned in my previous visit, there are many areas where Ventura and Santa Barbara counties are directly connected, not just economically, but ecologically, through shared fisheries and marine habitats. As we begin to look at future projects, those shared ecosystems are going to be an important part of the conversation. I also want to be transparent and note that Commissioner Jeff Mawson is a board member of the Ventura County Commercial Fishermen's Association. So just that relationship is clearly stated. At this stage, I'm not here with a specific proposal. I'm here to introduce this effort and ask for assistance. Any level of guidance, insight, or direction that the commission or staff may be willing to provide would be greatly appreciated. Whether that's informational resources or opportunities for follow-up conversations. I do have additional information and questions, but I want to be respectful of time here today and keep this introduction brief. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate your support and willingness to offer. I did present you guys with a letter stating all of this information, introducing ourselves again. This is something that I'm really passionate about. And as I stated, I've already met with county supervisors, and I do have a timeline of bringing this up as an agenda item for a Ventura County supervisor meeting and to get it on their agenda for approval. It's something I really think that we need in Ventura County on multiple levels. So I'm here for any questions. My contact information is on that sheet of paper. What I'll do is I'll reach out to Teresa if I can as a follow-up email and possibly get it to you guys and to follow up and possibly get a little more guidance and to report back to Ventura County. And if they have specific questions, and I'd like to work together basically to lessen any burden on you guys with anything that comes from Ventura County with the idea that we don't have a Fish and Wildlife Commission at this time, which I may be back here to speak for assistance on other projects because we don't have those resources at this time. And that's what addressing this it will do. So thank you. Any questions?
During the meeting here, I'll make you a bare bones skeleton of what this commission's all about, or what you could build a commission, how to do it, members, funding, the Fish and Game Code that you become your Bible, all that stuff. So I'll try to get that to you. If you hang around, I'll give it to you at the end of the meeting. If you don't, I'll see it gets to you one way or the other.
That's great.
Okay. Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they were up and running, going operation. I don't know why it disappeared. Probably just guys got old and died.
Well, the official explanation from the supervisors is just the funding didn't really have a place to go. And so they had some questions on keeping it or not. And so it was just a real gray area. And the involvement of VCCFA as an organization representing the commercial fishing and stewardship of the ocean has sparked this conversation to coming back to allow this to come back. So we were dormant in a sense. Our association has been around since 1987, but we went through a period of inactivity. And then what I did is I came on board about 2020-ish and rebuilt the association as it is today, and we're continuing to grow. So this kind of the sleepy side of things. And then now we're like waking up, and this is part of something that we need to address, is to have that resource available to us. And not just for commercial fishermen, but for all parties at stake, which I can see your board represents.
So David, do you know Mark Capelli?
No.
He works for the National Marine Fisheries Service. He grew up in Ventura County, but he was on Ventura Fish and Game Commission for a while before it was disbanded. He moved here and he worked with Frank Frost, who was a supervisor in Santa Barbara County at the time. And together they made a mandate to form the Santa Barbara Fish and Game Commission in 1975. So there is all these go-betweens between Ventura. My understanding from him is that the Ventura County Fish and Game Commission has winked on and off a couple of times. And so it's non-existent just at the moment. In our case, the composition of the committee, which Phil will talk to you about, and its mandates have changed over the years. We started with 10 members, and then we went to 15, and then we went to 12. You know, it was a series of resolutions by the Board of Supervisors, but we're living now under the 2016 resolution, and that creates 9 members, one from each of 5 districts, 1 commercial fisherman, and the other 3 from organizations that represent hunting and sport fishing groups.
Yeah, I really appreciate that history. That's something I will take back to VNA that helped strengthen this whole campaign. So I really do appreciate that. And obviously you guys are a very diverse group. Just on the limited searching that I've done on your commission here. And I think that that's something that I would push for, to be reflective of Ventura as well, is to be completely encompassing with all stakeholders. So yeah, I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much. I'm going to stick around because that's part of why I was here today, was to learn about the process.
I just have one other question. So the fish and wildlife violations that happen within Ventura County, are those funds, usually half goes to the county, half goes to the state? Do you know if the fishing violations fines are staying within the county?
That's a question that I want to follow up with VNA and with the Board of Supervisors and maybe their staff or some county guidance. I don't have that answer. I'm really interested in that answer. More focusing on where do we go from here forward. I don't know what's happening with it, and I think that's kind of part of the problem. They didn't know where to delegate it, but that's my assumption.
Yeah, because I think if there isn't a fish and game commission within the county, that the county supervisor are supposed to administer the money.
That's what I understand as well, and that's a portion of our interest, is to find out how to utilize those resources to better our ecological biodiversal area, you know.
One tip is just to remember 13103, because that's the state legislation that sets up some of the fish and game fine fees going to each of the counties. So if you look into the details, that's actually what we follow very closely in this commission.
Is that the propagation fund?
It's the Fishing Game Code section 13100 to 13104.
Okay.
And I don't think it has a name, but that's the number.
Okay, great. Well, that's great information. I really appreciate it. So thank you guys. I hope you have a great meeting. And as I said, I'm going to stick around. I'll stick around all the way to the end. Phil, thank you so much. I'll take any information you get. I'll stay the whole duration. I'll just be kind of quiet back there. And I do have my business card, although most of my contact information is already on that sheet of paper. So thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, the next order of business is the election of the chair and vice chair. Now, I'll start this thing out. I got a plan, but if any of you guys want to become new chairman or vice chair. Okay, well, my plan.
I second.
Okay, my plan is to the supervisors in the county here, they change chair every year. And I'm thinking, I would like to switch, have Scott become the chairman and me the vice chairman for the next year and see how that goes, and then we'll worry about it next year if I'm still alive and Scott's still alive. So, would someone nominate Scott for chair and me for vice chair?
I'll make the nomination.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Passed unanimously. Now Chairman, take over. I'm going to work on something else.
No, you have to pay attention, Phil.
Well, I always
Can
pay
we
attention.
make a motion for a vice chair also? Has to be separate.
Oh, okay. Um,
So stated. Make Phil be vice chair.
I second.
Thank you. And then all in favor? Okay, passes.
Okay, I guess at this point I take over. So we'll first consider the minutes from our last meeting. So did anyone have any comments or corrections on the minutes from the last meeting? That was on November 20th, 2025.
just to change the date of today's meeting. That's the only thing I saw. The next meeting scheduled for January 22nd, to change it to March 26th.
Consistent.
with what we're doing.
I think that was the plan date, but we didn't have a quorum. So should I make that change or? So the day of that meeting, it was,
Yeah, at
That
the
was the
time of
day.
meeting, it was,
Yeah.
the fact, it doesn't
That
matter.
was accurate.
Okay, do we, any motion to accept the minutes or any other corrections before I move on?
I'll move to accept the minutes. Second that.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, shall I have a vote? I'll say aye if in favor.
Aye.
Okay, we accept the minutes from the last meeting. Now we move to the standard agenda, and this deals with grant requests. So first, we have a proposal from Harvest to Heal, the Santa Barbara Urchin Divers and Scientists Unite to Restore Kelp. And so I believe Jim is here. And so Jim, if you could give us an overview of your project and what you're asking from us.
Thank you and good afternoon, commissioners and newly appointed chair. My name is Jim Knowlton. I am the owner and director of photography of Blue Ocean Productions, and I'm here to talk about a documentary film called Harvest to Heal. And if we look at this picture here, this is an urchin barren at San Miguel Island. I'm not sure if you guys have seen urchin barrens before, but it's an ecosystem that's basically out of balance. It's all the algae has been eaten by the urchins, which are overpopulated, and it's a big part of this documentary. So kelp forests worldwide are declining, partially due to warm water conditions, that water's becoming warmer. And off our coast here, off California, there's up to 90 to 95% kelp loss in coverage compared to historical levels. And that's because 2014 through 16, there was a warm water blob that came off our coast. And it stresses kelp because kelp likes cold, nutrient-rich water. So the kelp was already stressed, but to compound that, a virus happened that was called the wasting syndrome that killed nearly all of the sea stars off the coast, especially one called the sunflower sea star. And it's estimated like 5 billion sea stars basically melted away. And so the sea stars kept the sea urchins in check because when a sea star like the sunflower was on the reef, the urchins had to hide in the cracks. But without the sunflower star, they came out and overpopulated and overgrazed the kelp forests, literally gnawing on the holdfasts and eating any little upstarts that might land on the reef. So So there's a really big problem off our coast right now. And if you've been around for many decades, if you went to your favorite place that you used to go to, you would see a tremendous loss of kelp, which is really important because kelp is an ecosystem that houses like 800 or 900 species. And when the kelp forest goes away, then suddenly you'll have like a dozen, which is mostly the red and purple urchin. And so there's a decline in biodiversity and overall ecosystem health and a loss of the function of the kelp forest, which is like coastal protection. So it is a big deal that kelp is disappearing. The Kelp Forest Restoration Project is put together and led by Kim Selko of the Commercial Fishermen of Santa Barbara. And it's theorized that if you pick the urchins off the reef and remove them, that the kelp can come back. And there's many projects all over the state of California, and they are reducing the urchins by sometimes just taking a hammer to them. And in that case, there's no use of the urchin. And in some cases, recreational divers will go just collect them. Kim's project is where she is collaborating with divers to have them harvest the urchins, so to bring them back to shore so they can be used by ranching them, which is to take them to the cultured abalone in Dos Pueblos Ranch and fatten them up and sell them as food, or to use them as agriculture food because they're high in calcium and chitin, which is supposed to be really good for crops. And so this is a great project because it also involves UCSB that comes out and does monitoring of the reef before and after the urchins are harvested. So we have a collaboration between commercial fishermen and scientists. And the early tests after clearing is that the algae is growing back, and they're very excited with the results. And this is on a 1 acre site on the backside of San Miguel at Tyler White. And so early results are really promising. Harvest to Heal is the film that I'm working on, and I was hired by Kim Selko to document the project. I started in January of 2025, and actually at the invitation of Jeff Mawson, I went out in 2020 on his boat and saw reefs that I had seen on the backside of San Miguel. Backside of San Miguel, with the wind coming over the island and the upwelling, is the most nutrient-rich, cold upwelling water, and it's the most spectacular and full of life place. And when I went there in 2020, it was like a moonscape. It was frightening. So I've been filming literally since 2020 and all of since January 2025 with the activities of the project. The project does have funding for an 8 to 12 minute video, but after filming for almost 14 months and all that they've done, there is so much material here that it just deserves to be a bigger project because this is a win-win for Santa Barbara in that it's highlighting the commercial fishermen, the value of our fishing port, which is supposedly lands the most diverse catch of any port in California, and for UCSB and their involvement. And so the film also, it's going to increase some public awareness of the issue. And also a big part of this is how the urchins get used and that people can learn that urchins are tasty and where you can go get them to eat. So that's a quick synopsis of the issue and the project and the film. I did bring a clip. If you guys have time, it's about 4 minutes long. We could watch a sample video.
Sure, that'd be fine.
Okay. I think you'll understand everything I said even better, especially if this is going to work here. Do you know how to get that link to? Oh, there we go. Have a volume.
I dive 100 days a year out at the Northern Channel Islands for sea urchins. I'm a dive harvester, commercial fisherman. I go underwater for 4 to 5 hours a day and harvest red sea urchins and purple sea urchins. In the past, the kelp forest was probably half a mile wide along the coastline. It went out to 80 to 100 feet. It was thick. Within that kelp, there was a canopy, and underneath the canopy, everything thrived. What we're seeing now is a lack of kelp. There's stringers and there's small, tiny little patches. There's no kelp forest canopy left like there used to be. So it's really constrained the sea urchin fishery in a big way because we're limited to the areas that have kelp to harvest the sea urchins. Without the kelp, there is no sea urchin fishery.
A lot of kelp forests are declining, not just along the west coast of the US, but also all over the world. And here in California, especially Northern California, we really suffered huge losses. It was related to a period of really, really hot water. We call it a marine heat wave, and particularly during 2014 to 2016, hot water can negatively impact kelp itself. Kelp likes cold, nutrient-rich water, but this hot water also set off a chain reaction of events. Some people are calling it the perfect storm. The warm water exacerbated a disease that killed off most all sea stars along the west coast. And among those were a huge sea star called the sunflower star that's a huge predator on urchins. So when the sea stars died, the herbivores, that's the purple sea urchins, proliferated like crazy, mowed down all the kelp, which was already in a weakened state from the hot water.
They're just carpets of purple urchin, and the kelp cannot regrow. As soon as spores fall down, the urchin eat them up. There's no space because it's just a wall-to-wall urchin. And what people have found in other parts of the state is that if you can remove the urchin so that they're less than 2 urchin per meter squared, the kelp will regrow on its own. So kelp forest restoration was a topic that our urchin divers brought to us. They were aware of the work going on in other parts of California to engage the commercial diving fleet in restoring kelp forest, and they said, why aren't we doing that here? And I saw a big opportunity to bring that to commercial fishermen of Santa Barbara through a specific philanthropic opportunity, and I put together a plan, got partners, and here we are doing our pilot.
Thank you, Jim. Any questions for Jim?
Yeah, are you familiar with the Last Forest film?
Yes.
And because it documented exactly pretty much these same issues, but it just addressed it for Northern California. I guess my first overall question is there a process that you can replenish the sea stars? Because it seems like that's the first leg in this wheel, essentially, to try and get it reestablished, because we can't control the environment, and we're currently going to experience another very warm water situation. But if the disease that affected the sea stars has been found to somehow mitigate it from spreading, if there's a process ongoing to try and replenish and reintroduce the sea stars back into the environment.
Yes, so there is a big effort going on right now because there is a lab in Bodega Bay, I'm pretty sure is where it is, where they are breeding sunflower sea stars, and they've sent them out to other different marine institutions to give some to them. And Kim Selko is in communication with them, and there is talk about having an introductory project for the Channel Islands. It's just very slow because it hasn't been that many years, but that is a huge factor that I would personally love to pursue, and I think it's a great idea. So I think everyone else does too.
And I guess the other question would be, is you're currently coming to the commission to look for funding to finish out the documentary film. I guess the question would be, have you looked at other sources of funding? I know for the last forest, they were able to get the funding they needed by crowdsourcing. So that may be an avenue for you to pursue. But I do think it's very important to get as much public knowledge out as possible.
Thank you. I agree. So the last forest is a different method. This method here for Santa Barbara is a market-based approach to try to develop use for the products. And the state of California is actively working on a kelp management plan, and they're looking for projects like this where people are collaborating and finding very particular solutions. And so developing this team is the biggest goal of the project, in the sense that getting all these players together with their different skills and learning to work together to develop this team is going to enable Santa Barbara to be at the forefront of restoring kelp. So that's a great film, and yet I think that we need more outreach, and I think Santa Barbara, this is a win-win for Santa Barbara for so many reasons for all that they're doing.
So your request is for production work of the feature-length film, is that correct? The 50-minute.
So production in my field is like when you make the video, like you're shooting it. And so there's a little bit for production because there's still some more to go because we haven't finished all the shooting. And then post-production is really because there's so much video that the majority of what I'm asking for is post-production or editing.
So this funding isn't necessarily for the development of the collaborative team or for the habitat work. It's merely for the production, post-production of the film, correct?
Correct.
And so my follow-up question to that is, what is the call to action in that film? How does producing this going to directly benefit the habitat work?
Well, because the state of California is looking for teams, this film is going to, I think, help give credit where it's due to the team that's being built here. And also a big part of this is following where the purple urchins start and go to and then become food. And I go to like Fisherman's Wharf and watch people eating. So if people are more aware of the purple urchins being a food source that they can eat because it actually helps solve an environmental problem, the owner of the fish market at the Santa Barbara Harbor actually says in his interview that people are coming here because they believe eating purple urchins is helping. So I think, creating that awareness and is a big part of the film to say, eat more purple urchins.
Yeah, I don't disagree that it's an ecological disaster. I just want to know how funding it is going to help solve it. What's the direct?
Well, so this is more about education because the 13013, I don't have I put it up there, but this is educating people about an ecological problem, and by educating them, they will actually could potentially help solve the problem. You agree?
I do.
Yeah.
I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
Thought the funding would help.
Yeah, and also there's a social media component on this where, because this isn't the end of my presentation here, but the next few slides, which aren't that critical, but I've taken a bunch of films to film festivals. I've had numerous shows in the Santa Barbara International Film Festival and San Pedro and Blue Ocean Film Festival and won awards. So I think that I could carry this film into the public, space in a really efficient and successful way, I hope, and based upon my past. And so I'm asking for help to make this a winner in Santa Barbara with the money that can help the education go out.
So my question, Jim, is, so it qualifies under 13103A,
That's
which is
it.
public education
Yes.
under the Fish and Game Code. There were two issues. One is the economics of the urchin divers. And so it looked to me initially like a win-win, because I was wondering how the urchin divers were making money from this kind of scheme. And the problem is, in urchin barrens, the gonads, which are the part that are eaten, shrink to nothing in urchin barrens. So how can, an urchin diver make money when there isn't any product there to sell? But my understanding is, because the harvested urchins then go to a mariculture operation, they're actually fattened up and then sold. And my question is, do the urchin divers, how are they then paid? Do the mariculture operations pay them for providing them with urchins, or do they get a cut of the profits?
No, they get paid per pound for the purple urchins. And then the other urchins that are too small to ranch, because it would just take too long, go to become agriculture food like fertilizer. And that I haven't filmed yet, but so I'm not very knowledgeable, but my understanding is that Kim Selko is providing the too small urchins to the Santa Barbara city or county, and they're incorporating them in their compost, and they're doing tests to show productivity. So that really is still in development, but it is a potential way that urchin divers could be collecting the ones that are not really fit for eating because they're too small, and they could go to be agriculture food.
And my understanding was that Urchin Row was mostly an export project, mostly went to the Far East because it's eaten there. So the question is that the case now? Is most of the urchins harvested here? Does the roe go to Japan and China and places like that, or is it used locally?
So I'm not an expert on that, but my understanding is a lot more than it used to be is now staying local. And if you look at the purple urchins, they predominantly go to Dos Pueblos Ranch and are sold at the Santa Barbara Fish Market. Harry LaCornick sells them on the Santa Barbara Fisherman's Pier on Saturdays. And that's a really great segment of the show, because he says, when I started this, I couldn't give an urchin away. And now we're selling like 150 reds and like, I forget, 80 purples on the weekend. And as I was filming, he had 4 tents, 3 employees, and as fast as they could prepare urchins in cardboard boats and sell them, it was amazing to see 12 people in line, and all kinds of people bringing their kids and enjoying urchins right on the dock.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Do we have a motion on this application?
Before we move forward, just want to ask a
Oh,
quick
yeah.
public comment.
Oh, I thought, were you
So,
done?
so I could just flip through real quick.
Okay.
If this is working.
Is it? Give me a second.
There we go. So the main point of this slide is to say that these are some of the films I created that were award winning and that were in the Santa Barbara International Film Festival and in San Pedro International Film Festival. And this was going to be my summary to say that I believe this project directly supports 13103A, public education on fish and wildlife conservation. It's an educational documentary on kelp ecosystems, wildlife habitat, and restoration methods. It informs the public about the value of kelp forests to people, wildlife, and sustainable seafood. It translates scientific research and active restoration into public understanding. Expands awareness of efforts that restore marine habitat that benefits wildlife. Supports community engagement and stewardship of coastal ecosystems. promotes consumption of purple sea urchins as a market-based solution to reduce urchin populations and support kelp recovery. It highlights a restoration model being developed and tested in Santa Barbara County and provides educational content suitable for public presentations, schools, and community outreach. And so the request is for 29,000 to finish the 55-minute documentary, editing and post-production, and some final interviews, underwater filming, some aerials and supplemental footage, and to support the film festival fees and creation of educational outreach and community screenings. I appreciate you guys listening to my presentation and considering my request.
Thank you, Jim. Any other comments, questions? Whitney?
I guess I would just go back to, as important as this is to get it out to public knowledge and stuff, I think if you had researched and tried to get additional funding, outside sources and stuff, that we possibly could be a backstop to that. I think crowdsourced funding would be a definite avenue for this project to go down, because I've seen it in several other kind of types of documentary films and stuff. And it would be a great one for additional public exposure. There's been a couple of film nights that were held at the Blue Water Hunter. One was with Ghost of the Pacific, which documented the life cycle of the white sea bass. And recently there was one with Kimmy Warner, who's a world-class free diver. And I know that there is some talk about bringing out other films to Blue Water, and The Last Forest would be one that would fit in that niche. And I do think it hits all of the main topics that you're addressing here. So I think if you haven't tried to do any research for crowdfunding, I would suggest that you do, and maybe we could be a backstop to that to augment it. But I do think your project is very important. Public knowledge on a lot of things that affect us locally and, throughout the state are very important.
Your only hesitation then, Whitney, is wanting to see exploring other avenues of funding prior to a request. Is that correct?
Correct. So I think there may be avenues that are sitting out there that just may not have been tapped by you yet, and there's a possibility it's out there.
So Whitney, would you prefer we moved ahead with this proposal now, or that we send the applicant back to look for alternative sources of funding?
If it wouldn't be too much of a hardship on the applicant to go back and look for additional funding and then come back stating whether it was able to be, captured or not, would be, I think, a benefit to the commission. I think it's important to fund these types of things, but I think we could be more better suited as a collaborator on funding in issues where all other avenues have been exhausted first. And that's kind of just my personal point of view.
Okay. I suggest to the chair that we call the question if we can first, and if it doesn't pass, then can have him take that approach. Sure.
Preferable method, because it's very time consuming and people are sending in $20, and I would probably seek out other funding sources. And I came to you guys first because that poster is going to have credits on it. And I would love to see your guys' commission listed as a partner in what I think is a home run film for Santa Barbara that is going to show amazing imagery of our harbor, of our fishermen, of UCSB, and of fishermen collaborating with scientists. It's a win-win. And I just would be honored if you guys would help me move forward faster than starting a whole crowdfunding campaign, which is like a whole nother second job in addition to just finishing the film I'm trying to finish.
Well, you are aware that even if the commission tonight were to vote approval, it then has to go to the board, and it takes quite a bit of time before monies might be dispersed. Is that, what kind of a timeline are we talking about?
Oh, at least, what's more than 60 days, 90 days or more, sometimes longer. Takes a while to go through the process and actually get the money.
Yeah, this process, Jim, is we just make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors, and then they vote to approve or not approve it. It's usually pro forma, they usually approve it, but who knows, they could say no at some point. Then after that, it goes into, does it need CEQA review? Does it need this? Does it need? For the Board of Supervisors. So that whole thing takes some time. We're trying to speed it up, but it's tricky because then you get into the county's cogs and wheels, and those can sometimes be very sticky. I think the other thing is, I don't know if you know this, but it's a reimbursement process. So you make expenditures and then you submit the invoices or receipts to the county and they reimburse you for those expenses.
Okay,
I just wanted you to be aware of the process.
I appreciate that. Yeah, 90 days could be difficult. 60's feasible, but 90, I'm not sure I could float all of this 90 days and keep the project running because we're basically out of money. And so if 60 days was feasible, that sounds reasonable. If it was 90, that I don't know. I guess I'd have to consider, because there's also the chance they would say no, or if you guys gave your recommendation, they would probably approve it. Would you say?
Probably. But I think what we could do is just, as always, and Phil's tried to do many times, is expedite this and keep bugging Teresa and David and the accounting branch and the CEQA branch. So all we can do is try to speed along, but it sort of ends up in a whole county morass after it leaves us.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to make a motion, we do fund it.
Is there a second?
Before we move forward, can I ask for public comment, please? Since we do have public comment, is there
Oh,
anyone
public
in the
comments.
public that would like to make a comment?
Do we have to do public comment when we're
Yes, because it's a motion that's being carried.
really? Interesting.
Yeah, Chris?
You could come up to them.
I'd just like to add that I really support what they're doing, and I have a lot of personal experience with the purple urchin thing. Going back to 10 years, we opened a 12,000 square foot facility in Oxnard where we produced over 1 million pounds of a product called fertile urchin. And when it was used in the vineyards, cannabis guys loved it. We exported it to China. And then when COVID hit, the contracts got pulled back. And that stood to be a product that could have dramatically changed the landscape, right? In terms of creating a fishery that would have extracted and everything else. So that business did fold. And I really hope that the world doesn't lose this opportunity with these guys to pick up where we left off. So this is one of those key impasses where your yes vote could enable that for the future. So I just wanted to say that.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So we have a motion from Jeff. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Shall we vote? All those in favor of recommending this proposal to the Board of Supervisors? I guess there may be divisions, so we could raise our hand.
Could I just abstain from voting?
Sure. Okay,
It's only because I think, our process is long, and I would suggest you just still pursue crowdfunding to contact like the creators of the last forest to maybe get some lesson learned that can help you, because even though it will, it will probably be endorsed to recommend the funding and stuff, because the process takes a long time. And it sounds like your kind of go, no go is like 60 days from today, or maybe 60 days from a week or two, that you also look for other avenues. Because I think if you can get the lessons learned from other people that have done documentary films and got crowdsourced funding, it may augment the money that the commission may give you to help you even get farther along with advertising and then going out to the different film festivals.
Whitney, I just want to make sure that's not part of the motion because we do have a motion on the floor. We need to,
Right, I don't think that's part of the motion.
okay, just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
because it's on record.
Hey, so, any comments? I think we're ready to vote. All in favor of forwarding this proposal to the Board of Supervisor, say aye. Aye.
Then Whitney,
One abstention and 2, 3, 5, yes.
motion carries.
Okay, congratulations, Jim.
Thank you, Commissioners and Chair. I appreciate your interest and your yes vote.
And I'll be sending you some forms to fill out since you will be a new vendor.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the reconsideration of a proposal that Chris Goldblatt actually submitted back in December of 2024. This got tied up in all sorts of legal and other logistics in the last couple of years, and I can go through the history of people like the staff have actually gone through all of the hearings of this commission that were relevant to this issue, and we've checked the email trail and we've double checked with Fish and Wildlife. So we can go through that later, but we thought we'd first give you a chance to speak, Chris. So go ahead.
Sure. Thank you so much. And I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank everybody and Teresa for all the back and forth and support. And the initial grant that you gave us years back for $19,000 was a very important amount of money to get us this far. So the original grant was for a vessel, $50,000 towards that, $40,000 for the vessel, $10,000 for storage and maintenance and whatnot. And as you mentioned, it was back in 2024, so it's been a bit of back and forth. And the vessel is necessary. Certainly, if you look at the last grant that was given, it was reimbursement for the cost of the vessel for monitoring, and it's substantial. So us having our own vessel will save us from having to apply for reimbursement grants for charter moving forward. So it's actually a cost saving measure moving forward. So if you look at the grant application in blue, were the additions. I believe that we've addressed the key issue, which Fish and Wildlife said they had a concern about liability. Their understanding was at the terminus of our project that the vessel would be returned to them, and they didn't want to own that vessel because of the liability. And that's been fully cured by us adding to the grant application that at the terminus of the project, the boat will be sold and return the relative dividend to cash back to the commission, and that'll remove all liability. The relative dividend of the cash means basically the net $40,000 that was spent on the boat. That foresees the eventuality that we may buy a more expensive boat, $100,000, something like that. And if it was liquidated, the portion that the commission funded of that would basically be returned back to the coffers. So, I mean, the project will last a while. The current permits expire in 3 years, but I'm proud to say that we've pulled the trigger on the phase 2 65-acre permitting process. It's going to be a long, hard slog, probably 18 months, but we will get them before the 5-year mark expires. And then there is considerable resources on the sideline that has tacitly agreed to fund the master construction. The catch is once we have the permits in our hand. So we're on our own until that happens, but we're confident based on the success of the pilot project that we will get them, and having a boat to go back and forth at dramatically increased velocity. So maybe we've been out there 8 days a year, 10 days a year up till now. Our science team is going to need to be there 2 to 3 times that amount through the permitting process, because the baseline surveys and all of that, the bar is very, very high, especially if state lands are lead agency requires a full EIR. That remains to be seen if they require it or not. There may be some waivers involved, but if it's a full EIR, then we're basically going to have to live in Goleta Bay for about 6 months to get that one done. And that's where the boat comes in necessary. And there's no frills or bells and whistles. We're just looking for something reliable to get us back and forth. So hopefully we've cured all the issues to everybody's satisfaction.
Could you talk a little bit more about why you need to do this more detailed comprehensive monitoring? Is it for a CDP permit from the Coastal Commission, or is CDFW requiring this of you in the future? Why? Who's requiring the EIR and for what?
That's an excellent question. So what you're seeing is the confluence of two requirements overlap. So the monitoring that was set as part of the CDP for the 5-year study program requires that we're on the reef 4 times a year, 4 separate seasons. When we move, now that we've moved to phase 2, that same science team is handling all of the biological inputs to inform those applications. So those require detailed field studies of a 100-acre footprint and then 3 additional controlled sites. So just to collect that information requires a lot of trips. Once the permits are approved, either with or without a full EIR, the monitoring plan that Fish and Wildlife will put on top of that will likely be as robust as the current one we have, but that's 16 sea caves. If it's just the same monitoring plan, it's spread out over 100 acres or 65 acres of the net footprint, plus the control sites. So you can see how the work just escalates.
Okay, do we have questions for Chris? Well, first, does anybody want to know the whole history of this thing, or no? And so we can move from there. And do people have questions? Whitney?
Yeah, I have a question. So you're saying currently you're required to monitor the site 4 times a year for the 4 seasons. As the site grows, you could, in a sense, in my thinking, dovetail that, meaning that if you're out for the initial 1 season survey of the area, that the additional growth of the area will be surveyed at the same time to stay within the constraints of the 4-season monitoring. So it wouldn't be that for the growth of the site that you would need 4 separate trips. You would just create a longer trip to survey essentially the growth of the area.
Well, because the site is so much larger, the odds of getting it done in the same 1-day trip is nil. You would need multiple days, even if the requirement was the same.
So even if you say let's 2 additionals, then you're looking at about 8 trips a year
At a bare minimum, yeah.
and maybe 10 to 12 to cover the time that you wouldn't be able to do on the initial runs.
Yeah. And then leading up to that, like I said, there's this overlap of the current monitoring with the biological assessments for the phase 2 permitting. So for a while, there's a double duty occurring there.
And I noticed in your petition that you were citing that it was the current process that you're doing. Sometimes the volunteers have been unreliable to get you out when you need it.
With the exception of Hank Goebbels, who we're very grateful for. He's never pulled a no-show, but the other 3 or 4 boats, it's a consistent problem.
Yeah, but I'm just curious on why you haven't really pursued chartering a specific vessel to do the trips.
Well, I mean, it's a matter of availability of funds for the most part is the biggest constraint. There's not a lot of options for that for fully insured vessels in Santa Barbara Harbor. There's almost no options. 1 or 2.
Yeah, because I think there may be vessels that are commercially available to charter, and I believe their cost would be about a little less than $1,000 per trip, meaning that you can essentially have, at least for the next 2 years of your monitoring stage, be somewhat less than the $50,000 you're asking the commission to come up with. And they would be fully licensed and insured to cover you. And the other thing would be is I think most of the commercial charter fleet is very reliable. The only mitigating circumstances once you had a contract for a specific date would be the weather would preclude the trip from going, because most of the charter groups don't want to lose that funding. So the thing is that we would lay out the $50K for you to have the boat and stuff, insurance and storage, but then a couple of years down the road, if that portion of the project's over, it's my understanding the boat's going to revert back to the commission or to the county, and then it would be a requirement of the county to try and sell the boat or whatever to get their initial funding back.
Yeah, I could speak to 3 points. So no, the agreement would be that we would liquidate the boat and show up with a check and return the check to answer that. At the terminus of the project, so we foresee the project, the permitting being successful, and the project is ad infinitum. It's never going to end, essentially. So it's really a non-issue. We'll be out there for 20 years monitoring this thing. But to your point, and it's a good point, that why don't we just charter? And the answer is, the conditions in Goleta Bay are the most fickle I've seen anywhere in the world, and I've dove all over the world for 40 years, that you have 45 minutes at the peak of high tide when there's no moon and no swell, and if you don't get in at the high tide for that 30 minutes, you're not going to get your data. It's probably the worst place in California for conditions, and there's not a charter boat in the world that you can call and cancel 10 minutes before you need to go. You basically need your bullet in the chamber, and you got to have your finger on the trigger ready to go. Otherwise, you're not going to get the data.
And I guess the other question would be, so you requested to refurbish a 70-foot rad, and would you launch it from the pier or would you launch it from the harbor?
I updated that to 17-foot mini rad or similar vessel. It can be a whaler or something. It'd be launched from the harbor typically. I've never launched from the pier. It looks kind of difficult.
It is a little sketchy.
Yeah, I'll look into it.
Yeah, because then you're 5 minutes away from the survey site.
That would be ideal if it could work consistently and up to the minute like that.
Yeah, because my only other concern is if you have a smaller vessel and you still have to make the run from Santa Barbara Harbor up to the survey site, it could be a little bit rough depending on the conditions of the sea.
That's why I mentioned that we may fold the grant into a larger boat, that we fund the other half to be able to handle that.
Yeah, you said that, and you kind of, this boat, isn't fungible where you can sell this boat and put the money in a 100-foot boat or, a different boat. I mean, you're taking the money for a particular boat, and I would suggest that, to satisfy the lawyers and stuff, to sell this thing if and when it comes, either your project falls apart or you finish your use of the boat for the project, that it'd be sold at public auction. So it's, so you're not under suspicion of, selling it to your buddy for 1/10 of what it's worth, that kind of thing. So it puts you in a weird position. It puts us in a weird position because there's no way for us to really monitor how you're using the boat and what you're doing with it and where it is and all that kind of stuff. So my main question is, this seems like a perfect way for UCSB to use their boat and all them students, that you should try to make a deal with them to where you're using them to do all this work and using their boat, and they haul it to Santa Barbara and launch it. I don't know if they store it. I think they store it. Yeah, I don't know where they store it, but they not only have the students, but they also, I think they have they used to anyway, have a marine guy that collected specimens and stuff for their classes and things too, that use that boat. But have you ever talked to UCSB about that? I mean, you've got a guy from the Brent School on your list of people. What's his thoughts on that?
Well, number one, they charge the university. Everything. There's a big factor, a charge factor on it. Number two, they would require you to take out more or less untrained people, whereas we have a professional survey team that doesn't necessarily want to muddy the waters with people that are learning how to do their craft. So that's basically, and they would also not be able to do the up to the minute thing like I was discussing. It would all have to be scheduled weeks out.
Well, that's
I definitely would do that if I could find a way to make it work. I have reached out to them.
Okay.
Do you know what those charges were, Chris, from the university?
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
You mean per voyage or something like that? It's the numbers I've seen usually are packaged in a larger, 2-semester long survey reporting system. They haven't given me a number per day. They're not a for-hire charter service like that. But if you were to give them $100,000 to do the studies over a year, then you would get use of the boat. That's my understanding. That may not be the fact. That's my understanding of it.
Yeah, I was, thinking more of a, you know, taking your project and making it part of the university.
That's the goal. We are trying diligently to even make it a major, anthropomorphic reefing, because there's a real shortage of employment for people graduating from marine biology schools. There's probably 300,000 marine biologists in the United States and not a lot of jobs. The reef in Goleta Bay is going to be a substantial study and employment opportunity for UCSB for years into the future.
Yeah, I think one point of clarification, though, is that there are many research projects that use the boat operations at UCSB, and a lot of those are just academic divers and researchers. They don't have to include students. There is no requirement for non-technical people to go on these voyages.
If I could find a way to make that work and they're like, okay, you could use our boat and our people and we'll show up 5 minutes before you call us, I would definitely do that.
Other comments?
I think you raised an important one, Phil, with respect to disposition of the boat at the end. There needs to be some sort of a measure built into, not accusing you of engaging in self-dealing, mind you, but you have to include that provision so that it can't be a possibility or become an issue for the public.
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
I think the issue, though, is what you described, Chris, is different from this proposal, this revised proposal. So this revised proposal just deals with your 5-year permit. You're going out, here you say 3, but you mean 4 times per year. And you're dealing with meeting the monitoring requirements of your CDP, which is overseen by both CDFW and CCC. So Ken, this new stuff you tell us about, going through the new permitting, expanding your sampling and all that, is not what's in the proposal. So can you revise the proposal so we get a better indicator of what it's being used for and how often, and the extent? I assume you would only use the boat, or I think we all assumed, in Goleta Bay.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, look, there's a lot that goes into owning and maintaining a boat. You guys know that, right? So anyway, let me know what you guys want to do. I have 2 years into this. If you want to support the boat, support it. If not, don't do it.
Well, no, I'm just trying to get at, we're just trying to get at what you're actually proposing.
Yeah.
So what's in the written proposal isn't exactly what you told us tonight.
Yeah, because I think we all want to support this project. Me personally, I think it's very important. I just, for the life of me, I don't understand why California permitting process is such a arduous task. I mean, you're 12 to 14 years in the permit process just to do this experiment stuff. And I look at every other coastal state is doing artificial reef projects left and right because their states that they live in are a little bit more amenable to having artificial reefs. And with the whole MPA process that's going on and stuff, I just don't understand why the state makes it so hard to establish, artificial reefs and stuff. And I think your project, it's not just, in my opinion, going to create additional habitat, but it's also going to mitigate the loss of the Goleta Beach.
Yeah.
And I remember back to 1983 when we had this really first warm water El Nino effect. We had the severe storms, and I can remember going to lunch at Goleta Pier and seeing all of the kelp pulled up. Most of the kelp seemed to be attached to tube worm colonies that possibly never got to be able to reestablish. So there's no hard surface for the kelp to do it. But I don't want to rant and rave, but I think your project is so important, but I'm not sure that funds from the commission would be best used in the purchase of a boat when I think there's viable options through charter and volunteer to support the project.
Yeah, I mean, if you can give me the people that'll show up 20 minutes before, I'd be happy to do that, Whitney. But I'd like to speak to your comment on why California doesn't do reefing. Florida just got 20-something million for reefing. They share the excise tackle tax that we all pay 10%, and they got a little bit of Deepwater Horizon money. They sent out their reefing czar to California twice to recruit me to go to Florida. And they're like, what in the hell are you doing in California? You make the best reefing product in the world. Why don't you come out here? Here's a $2 million tender, show up and make it. Compare that to me having to beat my head against the altar here just to get a boat. Like, compare those two, right? And the real reason why reefing doesn't happen in California is because the excise tackle tax goes to Fish and Wildlife. Nobody seems to know how much money it is. It's usually in excess of $15 to $20 million a year distributed by the federal government to Fish and Wildlife, and it's not spent on reefing. That money goes to the other states in the union, and everybody demands that that reef money is spent on reefing. So it's spent on reefing. So what happens to that money at Fish and Wildlife? You'd have to ask them. It's not clear, but it does go to them, and it does not get spent on reefing. And that leaves us to fill the gap.
Well, Chris, the question that came up after the December 2024 meeting was that we approved your boat proposal, provided you specify how the boat would be used and how you dispose of it at the end of your project. And so you've got that in here. You say that you'll use Anglita Bay to fulfill the terms of these permits. And in this case, it was the 5-year permit, and you're 2 years into it, so it expires in 3 years?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, and then, so I was just thinking we were going with this instead of this expanded monitoring program. I calculated you use it about 12 times a year.
Yeah.
So is 12 times a year, worth of 50,000? I don't know. This is something that the commission needs to discuss. But the other issue, and this is where we got really tied up, was disposing of the boat.
Mhm.
And that comes down to who holds title to the boat, who owns the boat. And so we've gotten totally mixed signals. We actually, Dave Villalobos contacted Craig Schumann, who's the regional director for CDFW and Marine. And Craig said the county would own the boat. Well, if the county owns the boat, then you get into that whole morass, and the county is liable or has to get the insurance or deal with this storage or resale. So we're trying to get a fix from county if they wanted a boat, Just today at 3:30, Phil and Teresa and David and I met with a lawyer the county's now assigned to our commission. His name's Aaron Zambrano. And he actually said you would own the boat.
Yes.
And if the grantee would own the boat, but there are other issues. And so in our conversations, you'd say that this amount you're asking for would not be the full amount needed to buy the boat, that you would supplement it with other sources or something that you would amalgamate to buy the boat. And then he says that gets very complicated. So I just wanted to make sure, does this 50K, is that everything you need to buy this boat? Or are you putting in some more money from other sources or whatever?
Well, there's always going to have to be more money thrown into a boat. That's what BOAT stands for, bust out another 1,000. It's going to cost us money to own the boat. If we have our druthers, we would raise other money and buy about $100,000 boat. And when that's sold, we would owe the commission back 40,000 of that, because that's the net amount that went to the purchase. If we're not able to raise the other money, then we would just buy a smaller $40,000 boat. Because, to Whitney's point, it can be a tough ride up there. So you want a slightly bigger boat if you can afford one.
Got it. Other comments, questions, concerns, discussions? Do we have any sort of motion on this application?
Scott, before we proceed, can I add the public comment? We do have someone.
Oh, public, okay.
So if you wish to speak on this item, please raise your hand. And if you're online via phone, please dial *9 to unmute yourself. Anyone here? We do not have any public comment.
The only other caveat is that Craig Schumann said that this qualifies under 1303I, which is research. And under the provisions of 13103, that purpose, 1303I, requires CDFW approval.
Hmm.
So we still have to, if we recommend this, it still has to go first to CDFW for approval before it can go to the board. So any motions, any discussion, ideas about how to proceed?
The thought that keeps going through my mind is that this almost needs some kind of a contract above and beyond what we're putting in what's going to end up in this grant proposal. If we, reapprove it, I would say it might get shot down at the supervisors, and that is a pretty rare thing, but the supervisor staff, the lawyers and stuff are going to get involved. And I don't think it would fly with the document that we're using. That's just my thoughts on the subject. I don't mind putting it forward to the supervisors and let them let them deal with it. But it's gotten to be a real sticky wicket as far as the different levels, the lawyers. There ain't nothing quite as. I mean, I've boats all my life. Other than the fact that it seems like a very expensive whaler to me. It's it is what it is. But anyway, that's my thoughts on the subject. If someone puts it forward, I'll probably vote yes on it.
Before there's a motion, can I make one more comment? The relationship with the commission and Fisheries Project is an excellent one, and I'm so deeply grateful for that. And I think that in the future, we can put forth grants that will make more sense to you. So my sentiment at this time is I think we should withdraw the grant. And because I value preserving the relationship over trying to figure this out. And we'll find a way. So I think that's best at this time, if it's okay with you.
The only final question I had, Chris, is this actually came from Craig Schumann, but Peter Carlson's role, he's associated with UCSB. So what does he do as part of your project? Is he involved in the planning? Does he consult? What is his role in your project?
He goes out. So he's a subcontractor. So he's not hired through UCSB. He just works for UCSB. And he goes out with Dr. Ryan Jenkinson, and they're the primary research team that does all the raw data collection every 4 months. And then they compile the quarterly and annual reports and submit those to Fish and Wildlife and Coastal Commission for the CDP.
Okay. Any solutions?
Well,
ideas?
Didn't he just withdraw the proposal?
Oh, you withdrew the proposal?
Yeah, just because the relationship is more important than trying to figure this out.
Okay.
In our opinion. So yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
And then, let's see.
Well, the next agenda item I actually put there, and I'll give you a little background first. And what this is I set in on a variety of meetings of different consortia of people dealing with fish and wildlife issues. And one of them is called the Biodiversity Working Group that was started by the Botanic Garden and the CEC, the Community Environmental Council. And it includes, I got the list of all the organizations that belong, but there's about 44 of them. And they include things like the Bucket Brigade, the Coastal Ranches Conservancy, the Fire Safe Council for Santa Barbara County, several land conservancies, so High Valley, Santa Barbara, Ventura, and White Buffalo, the Wilderness Youth Project. It goes on and on. So they have a lot of NGOs and some agencies and advisory groups involved. Their whole purpose, thank you, Chris, is related to enshrining biodiversity considerations into the county and city of Santa Barbara's actions and decisions. So what they did, kind of independently, there's a fellow named Eric Cardenas, who some of you know, but he now works for the Botanic Gardens, and he wrote this draft resolution. And what they've done is they've gone to each of the cities in the county, as well as to Santa Barbara County itself, and asked for an elected official to champion the resolution. And so you've got the resolution in hand. I think it has problems, but I'll talk about those in a minute. And then what they're trying to do is get various endorsements. So the champion that they obtained for the county is Joan Hartman, who's the 3rd District Supervisor. So I talked to her about it, and I'm actually working with her office to try to revise both the resolution and our potential letter of support if we decide to go that way. And the problem, one of the big problems is that with a resolution, the county only accepts 350 words. And so this is way too long compared to what the county will accept. And so I talked at length to Megan Dettenhofer, who works in Joan Hartman's office. And so that whole preamble about whereof and whereas and all this mostly goes out. They just want to basically create reasons for why biodiversity is important to the county. The 5 things at the end, which are the actual resolution, those are the things that she would like to carry. And I noticed one thing off the bat was its mention of marine protected areas. So I went to Joan and Megan and said, you've already got our letter on MPAs. You know what our stance is, that we don't believe like the Carpentria MPA should be put in place. And so I said anything to do with MPA should go out of the resolution, and I've already taken out of a potential support letter. So I also talked to Eric Cardenas and said, look, I know you've already sent it out to all these organizations, but you're an this whole biodiversity working group deals with terrestrial and freshwater systems. It doesn't really deal with marine systems. There are other mechanisms for that. So I said, for the future, as the Botanic Garden or CEC comes up with their own letters of support for different resolutions across jurisdictions, they should get rid of anything that refers to marine environments. So they're going to do that. But the problem we have, as always, is that one of our mandates is to advise the Board of Supervisors. And Joan is already, moving forward with this resolution, though it'll be drastically condensed and just deal mostly with those 5 be it resolved issues at the bottom. And so I thought that's an opportunity we could discuss and weigh in. The problem is, we only meet quarterly at best, and a lot of these events come and go before we ever have a chance to comment on them. In this particular case, the resolution will go to the Board of Supervisors on May 15th. So we have some time, but then it comes down to, and we'll discuss this next, are we going to meet in April or not? Are we going, supposedly our original second meeting was supposed to be at the end of April. Since we're having a meeting at the end of March, we need to discuss when we want the next meeting. So if we can discuss whether or not to endorse a toned down resolution, as I described, and whether or not you want us to move forward with the support letter, I did, but we may need a little leeway if we don't meet in April, because there won't be another meeting before the time, May 15th, when it comes to the board. So this is why this is coming forward, is sort of giving advice to something that's coming to the Board of Supervisors anyway. And when you read its mandate, a lot of it's what we do. It's protecting, preserving, conserving fish and wildlife populations. So I thought it was a pretty good fit, except for these marine issues, which are taken care of by other mandates and organizations. So I'll just open it up for discussion, but the first thing is, what would you think of a toned down resolution that mostly deals with those last 5 bullet points? And the other issue is, do you support the support letter that I wrote for that resolution?
Page 2, support letter.
Yeah.
I gave that a quick read, Scott. I had a couple concerns, I guess. Bottom paragraph, expansion of protected areas. That's a hot button issue for a lot of us who've seen that mean exclusion of consumptive users. And also says habitat restoration projects. I don't know if that is the specific term used by Fish and Game. For instance, out on Catalina Island, they bypassed all of the what I'm looking for, public discourse by declaring it a habitat restoration plan, and unilaterally decided to exclude the public from decision making in order to grant the Conservancy a blanket permit to kill all the deer. I don't know if that's the habitat restoration project specifically as used by Fish and Game, or if that's just sort of a generic term used for projects that we fund.
Well, I had assumed it was the latter. I thought it was just like the projects we fund to refurbish, improve wildlife habitat.
I assumed that, but it
Yeah.
was close enough in meaning
Yeah.
of how they're using it to exclude any kind of public discourse elsewhere to warrant discussion.
Yeah. I think the reason this is moving forward now is it's sort of shot across the bow with a lot of things that are in progress at the county. So the county just finished its Parks and Recreation Plan, and it's in the middle of modifying the open space element of its general plan. And the next issue is then they're going to tackle the conservation element of the general plan. And there was new state legislation passed about wildlife corridors and wildlife connectivity, and it now requires each of the counties and the cities to address wildlife connectivity, wildlife corridors in their general plans. So they have this whole set of stuff kind of lined up. And this was sort of getting people in the mood for then looking at all these changes to county policy.
You mentioned something about white buffalo as well. What's that relationship with the county?
They're just a member of this working group, of this biodiversity working group that the Botanic Gardens put together.
So if I did some wordsmithing on this, or the letter part, okay, that on the bottom of the second paragraph, number 2, expansion of protected areas. Yeah, I would change protected to conservation areas.
Okay.
I mean, we're not into protection here, we're into conservation. They're quite a bit different. Have the same result as far as animals are concerned, but protected keeps people, which are part of the biodiversity as human beings.
I get your meaning.
Okay. And then the other thing that caught my mind was increased collaborative conservation networks, which includes tribes, agencies, NGOs, land trusts, educational research institutes, and that collaborative conservation network should include commercial and sport fishermen and other outdoor user groups. There should be all part of that.
Yeah, I agree.
You know.
I was trying to figure out, I've always felt, to be frank, I'm a conservation biologist, but I've always felt that hunters, fishers, and conservation biologists were working toward the same end. It's to enhance fish and wildlife populations, so we can all enjoy them.
Plus, a lot of the money for conservation comes from hunting and fishing.
Yeah.
Hunter and fishermen and groups, Ducks Unlimited, all that kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand that part, but I mean, we shouldn't be putting stuff in our own letters that doesn't
Yeah, no,
emphasize that,
This
you know?
is great.
Yeah,
I was trying to figure out a way to put hunting and fishing into this. But
And I-
anyway, that's great.
as far as timing of the next meeting,
Shall we bring that up now?
well, it kind of all
Yeah, it falls
dovetails
together.
to some degree.
So, so the question is, Phil has also written a kind of resolution for our body. And he doesn't know if we're meeting in April or not, but it'll be kind of, he'd rather go out sooner than later.
I'd like to find, the timing's not my bailiwick, but John, do you know when the deadline is for the response to the state parks Gaviota Pier stuff would be? To get this, to get the Board of Supervisors to do a resolution asking to have Gaviota Pier fixed, what would the deadline of that letter getting from the supervisors to the state? I don't know. So sooner better than later. Okay, so, under the Brown Act, I don't know if we can act on the letter at this point, but,
This is something you may know, Teresa, but in almost every other advisory group, we've been able to do email decisions. And, is there any way we can change this thing that we can just share information electronically and through mail and then move? Because it really ties us down if we have to do everything in person.
Like to meet for next month or the letters?
Just in general, can we, like say a letter, an issue came up, we should comment on, and yet it comes between our meetings. So is there any way we can act quickly? Because by the time our next meeting occurs, the issue's passed.
yeah, I don't think so. I think we have to,
Has to have an open.
they make us vote vote on all the letters, basically. So, it didn't used to be that way, but it is.
And what you could do is create like an ad hoc and a committee, and you can work with someone and at least there's two people creating a letter. And then so when you bring it forward, at least there's two different,
But
It still
still,
has to be brought back.
but it still has to be brought back to
Right.
this.
it still has to get
Yeah.
voted on. Yes.
And is that true of all committees or advisory groups? In the
Anything
county?
commission votes on has to be done so in a public meeting.
Okay.
Was there any,
You
is,
can't bring it up and vote on it at the same day because it has to be noticed in advance for the public to
yeah,
comment.
quite a bit,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Is there anything else besides, I hate to bring us back for just this letter, although it was an important thing to work on and on the April date in the month, nothing pending that might come up that,
No, the one that we did have was,
If we meet in a month, the third district supervisor may have the final
yeah,
resolution.
there you go, that too, yeah.
But I just didn't know if we're going to meet in April, because otherwise then we miss commenting on this issue.
On that issue, yeah, that'd be that and whatever else comes up in the meantime, but, it's okay with, obviously I just drafted the letter, so I'm willing to come to a meeting in April in Santa Maria to do it. But
Yeah.
what do you guys?
It was April 23rd at 6 p.m. And
What would it be? The 23rd,
I think it is.
Thursday?
That was already
That's the meeting.
that was
schedule
already
anyway.
proposed, so I've got that blocked out, so I'd be available.
Well, I think the two issues are, I could work on this letter if I could get your input, or if
Sure.
anybody else has input on this letter, the biodiversity resolution. And the other issue is Phil has another resolution that deals with the Gaviota Pier. And he would also like to bring, so we at least have those two agenda items. And I think we're happy to come to Santa Maria if you guys, if that's okay. We just need to get a quorum.
Yeah. I'm good with it.
I
Okay.
should be around, and if not, I'll make sure to be able to Zoom.
And Zoom's fine.
so Zoom is fine as long as we have a quorum in the building and it's noticed on the agenda.
My
Yeah.
location
Mhm.
from the Zoom.
From the Zoom. Yeah.
How does that make him add to the quorum?
No.
No, you still have to have a quorum.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, my presence on
Physically,
Zoom
you have to have.
doesn't make a quorum.
doesn't make a quorum.
But you can vote on an item. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You can vote, but it's not part of the quorum. That's interesting.
Odd. How do we change that?
so we had Jeff join us online, but he was not able to make any motion.
State law?
It's a Brown Act, yeah.
Well,
Willie Brown, he sits back in the Chinese restaurant in Sacramento called Fat Fong's. And he had a big round table where he had lunch. And that's where they did most of the business. And then he comes up with the Brown Act, or somebody did it because that's where he did his business. I don't know. But Willie Brown was quite a guy. For a bucket of lobsters, he'd do almost anything.
So to wrap this up, I think we would schedule our next meeting for the 23rd of April. Phil will bring forward his letter on the Gaviota Pier, and I'll refine. Hopefully the supervisor will have her resolution refined by that point. And then, of course, any other.
And then Phil, do you have the letter with you already?
I gave it to the chair.
Okay.
Oh, where is it?
It's on that.
Oh, this one.
Thick, heavy
Oh,
piece
can
of
I get
paper.
your comments too on
Comments on what?
the biodiversity resolution?
Sure, I just.
Mhm.
Okay.
My chief concerns, and I'm sure that Jeff share them as well.
Yeah,
is, you know, yes, habitat protection, but not at the loss of hunting and
Access.
fishing opportunities, access. When you lose all of those user groups, you lose your biggest advocates. They're the ones that are connected to the land. They no longer have access to it. You don't have your advocates anymore.
I agree. Well, the two other issues, has everybody seen the financial report? And I didn't know if there are any comments about it. One thing a question I had for you, Teresa, is there's this 40,000 allocation for, it looks like physical plant or space or something. Do you know what that is? Or maybe Phil knows.
I asked David about it, and he was gonna look into it. It looks like it's just a placeholder because it's never been used.
Okay.
But I don't think it relates to any one of the grant proposals that I can see. But I was just curious why it all of a sudden showed up. But I mean, maybe it's been there for a long time. But I don't want 40,000 a month or a year coming out of our budget
No.
to pay for, somebody else's rent. Yeah, something like that. I do want to print up a bunch of very educational poker cards and fund a poker game. Never mind.
Okay, and then, so any other comments about the budget? I think we still have about $690,000 in the budget to allocate. So if you know of projects that benefit fish and wildlife, just encourage people to apply.
You might want to read the exact number.
Yeah.
694, 524
Yeah. so
into the
amounts
record.
$694,574.
That is,
724.
yeah, that doesn't include the 3 grants that were just approved at the
Yeah.
Board of Supervisors. So that brings it down to 88,511.
Okay,
Brings it down to what?
800, that should be something.
Says 6. Okay, now you got,
Oh, I see what you, yeah,
huh?
688. I'm sorry about that.
688. Okay, cool.
688,000.
Brought in about 7K in fines last year for the whole year.
Bunch of honest guys in this county. Okay.
And then the other thing Teresa now does is track which of our proposals get approved by the Board of Supervisors. So that's the last page in the materials you got. So most of them have gone through.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I so move.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you
Thank you.
very much.
Here's my comment.